AI is coming for Hollywood in force. Thanks, Amazon. I'm Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic, and let's dive in. Now, there's a really interesting write-up in The Independent by Dawn Chmielewski and Greg Benzinger, but before we dive in, we all know that artificial intelligence is essentially coming for pretty much every vertical, and Hollywood is not immune from that. We saw the Writers Guild strike over the use of AI in script writing and all those different kinds of things a couple of years ago, but now there have been some major moves, and this is what that article from The Independent really dives into. And so I want to talk about that as the backdrop, and then explore the short-term and long-term ramifications of what is happening here that Amazon is leading the charge on, and quite frankly, I don't think it's good. Now, here's what's going on. Amazon plans to use artificial intelligence to speed up the process for making movies and television shows, despite fears that AI will obviously cut Hollywood jobs and permanently reshape the industry. There is a veteran entertainment executive, Albert Chang. Now, he has been hired by Amazon to lead the team at Amazon MGM Studio, and he's been charged with developing new AI tools that he said will cut costs and streamline the creative process. Amazon plans to launch a closed beta program in March, inviting industry partners to test its AI tools. The company expects to have results to share by May of this year. Now, Cheng described the AI studio as a startup operating under Jeff Bezos, Amazon's founders, his two-pizza team philosophy. Now, that means basically that you keep the group at the startup or the organization small enough that it could be fed by two pizzas. Whether those are small pizzas or large pizzas, you tell me. Now, the team consists primarily of product engineers and scientists with a smaller creative and business contingent. Amazon is publicly embracing AI in response to spiraling production budgets that limit the number of shows and films that companies can produce. So, the technology will fast-track certain processes to make more movies and TV shows basically more efficiently, to make them more efficient in general as well. So the move to adopt artificial intelligence comes as A-list actors like Emily Blunt, married to The Office's Jim, of all people. Emily Blunt has expressed fears about the rise of AI, particularly that AI, the AI actress that just came out, Tilly Norwood, that I did a segment on a while back, would essentially make their jobs obsolete. Now, Amazon emphasized that writers, directors, and character designers will be involved at every stage of the production using AI as a tool to enhance creativity. In other words, Amazon, the company that recently just fired, 15 to 20,000 people, and before that, another 60,000 people, are saying they're not going to fire their creatives, but essentially kind of feels like maybe they are training the AI to be their job replacement. I don't know. I wouldn't mind interviewing one of those people. And so, yeah, we all knew this was coming at some point, and it was coming in force for Hollywood like it is for any other vertical. And so with that, let's dive in, because first I want to start with the short-term negative ramifications of this, because we all know what they believe the positives will be. It'll be cheaper, it'll be more efficient, it'll be more streamlined, it'll cost less, aka less humans, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this obviously in the short term has real potential for industry disruption and obviously the impact to labor, job displacement and reduction in demand for traditional roles like editors, visual effects artists, script assistants, all this kind of stuff. A lot of that's going to become automated. The human element might be there now, but I don't think it's going to be there in the short term and therefore the long term as well. On top of it, increased tensions or strikes from creative guilds and unions. We just saw, like I mentioned, the Writers Guild go through that. Essentially, they're going to go out in force again over AI replacing the humans. And then there's the short-lived quality issues. The AI slop is absolutely everywhere. And so if these tools are generating things like subpar visuals or continuity errors or poor creative elements, we might have shows that maybe are produced very quickly and cheaply and put out, but maybe nobody's watching them or nobody cares. Part of what I think we like about television and movies is that human element, that we can relate to a main character. We can all agree the bad guy's the bad guy, except for the few of us that like the bad guy, or maybe the bad guy is that dark hero. We're going to lose some of that. AI is not human in that vein. And on top of it, in the short term, creative and quality risks, I think, will creep up as well. If there's an over reliance on AI for editing or narrative decisions, this could essentially lead to like a homogenized output that doesn't really lack that depth that I'm talking about or that original artistic nuance. And so also, I think there could be reduced incentives to invest in creative processes if the AI shortcuts are simply what we're just going to be using. And then there's the whole talent relations and reputation side of this in the short term as well. Backlash from high profile actors. I just talked about, Jim Halpert's wife, Emily Blunt, so actors, directors, different types of creatives, they're going to go out in force and they're going to be very public about this. They're going to go on the Stephen Colbert's and the Jimmy Kimmels and all of this and talk about this, not to mention getting a lot of airtime in the news. On top of it, there's going to be legal disputes around the use of actors' likenesses or voices or performances, and that's essentially foreshadowed kind of by the No Fakes Act around digital replicas. And so that's going to be a problem. You know what I mean? If the AI, looks and kind of sounds like Emily Blunt, for example, then Emily Blunt's going to sue somebody. I mean, and that's just who that is. Now, Denmark has taken an interesting step and allowed their citizens to basically create a copyright of their likeness. So in other words, if I was a Danish citizen, essentially my voice, my face, my biometrics are technically, I could copyright that under Danish law, but no other country is doing that right now. And so this opens up, I think, a legal gray area, especially in the short term. Not to mention technical and workflow friction, I think, as well. Early integration challenges between AI tools and existing creative software made slow production as they're trying to figure out how to integrate this. Amazon's first few months are probably just trying to streamline that process. And so the risk of errors in the automated process, such as an AI misunderstanding the context and all of that. So you just spend a whole bunch of compute time to have garbage, delivered. All those kinds of things are an issue. But the long-term damage, I think, and the long-term ramifications of artificial intelligence coming from Hollywood, like any other industry, I think are legion. This is clearly going to be an erosion of the creative ecosystems that these studios, these directors, these creative types have when basically making TV shows and movies and all of that, right? A shift towards AI-driven production could diminish the value of simply the human craft. And I think that's an issue that weakens traditional creative industries over time. Smaller or more independent creators could be priced out or marginalized if they cannot match AI accelerated production scales or timelines as well. Compute for AI is expensive. And if you're small and independent and you're doing it yourself and you've got long production runs because of the editing process and you can't afford the AI, well, you might be priced out of the game. Or maybe people will be so angry on the AI that they will covet those few left independent standards. I mean, it's crazy. Another one is market and cultural homogenization in the long term as well. Content may trend towards more formulaic patterns if the artificial intelligence models are essentially trained on existing data. And so then they reinforce existing tropes instead of basically creating or fostering any kind of innovation. Think about the movies that we've seen over the decades, literal decades, and some of the unique perspectives and creatives that are uniquely human generated. Well, the AIs are learning on that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come up with their own thing, right? On top of it, we could potentially have a loss of cultural diversity if artificial intelligence prioritizes mainstream, commercially safe content over niche voices. I mean, think about some of the more out there movies that we've seen over the years that have really made impacts, in society in some way or another, whether it's simply just controversial, like Natural Born Killers or Hedwig and the Angry Inch, or something that just takes us completely in a different direction in thought, whether it's, E.T. or The Green Mile or take your pick, or the human stories like Shawshank Redemption. If we are playing it safe, that's a problem. And then there's the intellectual property and legal complexity in the long term as well. Proliferation of AI in production increases the risk of copyright infringement or unauthorized replication of things like styles, performances, all of that. That's a short-term thing that Emily Blunt can sue on, but she can still sue 10 years later, when this thing is fully embedded. On top of it, longer-term legal battles over the rights to artificial intelligence-generated elements could basically have a huge impact on the legal system, drain resources, all this kind of stuff. And then there's the ethics side of this. We're the audience. They're not building AI or using AI to build movies so that the AI can watch it. We're the ones that are going to be watching this and ingesting this. And I think there's going to be trust issues with this. I think about audience perception. Right? Authenticity could erode basically if AI generated, let's say, period pieces or characters or visuals feel artificial or misleading. We've already seen like reproductions, for example, of Martin Luther King doing things, thanks to Sora, the meta image generator or video generator, where it looks and sounds and kind of feels like Martin Luther King doing something like playing basketball or, whatever they've got him doing. That's not authentic. That's not what we know of that person. And it could possibly warp reality as well. Potentials for deepfake misuse, especially if the rights frameworks lag behind technical adoption. Laws come after technology. Basically, that's how it works. Technology innovates incredibly fast, but actually generating laws that put guidance around this, oftentimes it's incredibly slow. And in the United States right now, we have a Congress that can't get together and vote on what to have for lunch, let alone talk about these very longitudinal issues and then legislate on that as well. Talk about economic centralization in the long term as well. Large players like the Amazons could gain just an outsized control over content output and distribution because they can pay for the compute to just rip this stuff out 24/7, 365. And that, again, hits the smaller studios. It reduces competition. And AI just disproportionately favors companies with deep pockets because, again, it's expensive, the compute that AI needs. And so by virtue of that, it could potentially create a monopoly amongst big tech being the only ones that can really efficiently create anything in a timely manner because everything is moving that way. This is, I think, not good. And I think we have to have a longitudinal discussion on essentially what this is going to mean for society, what this is going to mean for the world, but what this is going to mean for not just human jobs. And we have to have economics. Otherwise, what are we looking at? Something like universal basic income? Maybe. I'm not an economist, but that's a real possibility. But the other side of it is if we start losing creativity. I recently heard a quote from somebody that said, AI really is for the lazy. And you can have very productive people use artificial intelligence for efficiency's sake. But if I'm trying to create a screenplay and I don't know what I'm doing and I just have the AI do it for me and just tweak it here and there, that's not good. That I'm not thinking outside the box. I'm not thinking creatively. That's our own brain rot. And if we are just letting others, have the answers for us, that's an issue. Now, this has been a debate that has basically gone all the way back to Socrates. And Socrates did not want to write anything down because he believed that essentially he would lose his memory by virtue of that. But his pupil Plato wrote everything down. Fast forward to about 20, 30 years ago, where there was a debate on should students actually have calculators in class. You should have to learn to do the math yourself. Nobody has a calculator in their pocket all the time. Now that we're in the smartphone era, but we rely on calculators very heavily. Now we're relying on artificial intelligence and on and on and on. So I think overarchingly, this is not going to be a good thing longitudinally for society, but more particularly outside of the economics, it's the creativity issue that I really take concern with. And I think losing that creativity, losing that uniqueness, losing that one individual out there that has amazing ideas, but quite frankly, isn't listened to because the AI would rather or the studios would rather just use the AI to crank all of this stuff out. That's not good. We are going to lose something that is intrinsically ours, and we are going to replicate it in an artificial way with artificial intelligence. And I think we should all stop and think about that and have a good long debate before this actually fully comes to fruition. Not that that's going to stop Amazon. That is your deep dive. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, 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 don't stay private, secure, and informed. Take care.